Welcome to CCN Midday News. I'm your host, Captivating Christian, and here are some of your top stories for today, the 3rd of June. The trucker who drove through a crowd of protesters in Minneapolis was once arrested for domestic assault. Several governors turned down the Pentagon's request for National Guard troops. A man who traveled to Minneapolis to start a riot has expressed enthusiasm for Trump. And chaos erupts at a peaceful Black Lives Matter protest after a white man pulls out a gun. Chechen leader accused of massive torture and murders offers Donald Trump human rights advice to end the mayhem. Email from Tim Cook sent to Apple employees about George Floyd. And Louisville's police chief fired after fatal shooting of a black business owner. Civil rights leaders left stunned after trying to explain racism to Mark Zuckerberg in a Facebook meeting. And top Trump campaign aides push anti-gay positions, saying legalizing same-sex marriage would lead to bestiality and pedophilia. And lastly, meet the 16-year-old genius whose IQ is higher than Bill Gates and Albert Einstein. Let's get to the news. A man who was arrested after driving his tanker truck through a crowd of George Floyd protesters in Minneapolis on Sunday had been previously arrested for domestic assault, public records show. He has also made political donations to President Donald Trump and the Republican Party, Bogdan Vercherko, that's how you say it, age 35, was arrested on the suspicion assault after driving through a gathering of protesters on the I-35 West shortly after 6 p.m. yesterday. Vercherko previously charges were listed on the Minnesota Judicial Branch website. It shows that Vercherko was charged with a misdemeanor domestic assault, disorderly conduct, and interfering with a 911 call. The 3 charges stem from an incident that happened back in August 1st of 2012. In November of that year, Vercherko was convicted on disorderly conduct count and had the other 2 charges dismissed. He was given a 30-day sentence, which he carried out in the Hennepin County workhouse. He was also convicted back in 2009 for failing to wear a seatbelt, in a January 2020 for failing to display the registration number on a snowmobile. Political records also mention Vercherko as a Federal Elections Commission filing showing that Vercherko donated $100 to Donald Trump Make America Great Again committee back in October of 2019. Before that, he also made 2 donations to the Republican National Committee, one for $115 in October of 2018 and another for $100 back in August of 2018. Okay, so here's my thoughts on this article with Mr. Vercherko. I do understand that when going at a speed in a truck like that, it is hard to just immediately stop and, put on brakes in the midst of you driving, I guess, down the highway and seeing a crowd and reaction and all that in reaction time. With that said, though, I do like how the media sometimes likes to do the same thing that they do to people of color, is in which they always go after the background of the person and connect that to the reason why they could have done the act that they did. So this was nice to see that here he is, an avid Trump supporter, a supporter of the Republican Party, and that he may have seen those people earlier somewhere down the line and felt like, I'm tired of this, and hit the brakes or continued to go through the crowd. who knows? And hopefully he will serve, and justice will be served on for that incident. He obviously has a thing of anger, a history of anger, of some sort of domestic violence or disputes. So, it just goes with the territory. It's nice to see them get a taste of their own medicine a little bit too. That's my thought. Democratic governors in Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania, and Delaware have turned down requests from Defense Secretary Mark Esper to offer National Guard troops to help with security in Washington, D.C. In some instances, the Defense Department was counting on troop support from those states before the governors intervened. After the Pentagon official told CNN that support was expected from Delaware as well, but the troops were diverted to Wilmington. Democratic Governor John Craney's office confirmed to CNN that it received a request for troop help, but decided against it because of the needs in Delaware, but also said that the president's posture played a role in the decision. He said, frankly, the rhetoric coming out of the White House seems like it had the potential to provoke additional unrest, and for those reasons, the governor was not comfortable with members of the Delaware Guard assisting in response. Delaware is not sending members of the Guard to Washington at this time. And the same thing in Virginia. Virginia's governor, Ralph Northam, who's a Democrat, had made the decision not to send troops after consulting with Washington, D.C.'s mayor. Pennsylvania as well, their state officials also confirmed that they, too, turned down the request out of concern for the need of troops to deal with issues in their own states. On Monday, Trump intensified his rhetoric about using military force to dominate protesters and wished aloud there was an occupying force in the cities across America during a call with governors where he urged a tougher response to protesters. Later, law enforcement officers appeared to eyewitness accounts to be rubber bullets at a peaceful protest crowd outside of the White House, and smoke filled the air. A spokesman for the Pentagon told CNN on Tuesday that the National Guard did not fire tear gas or rubber bullets. Okay, so here's my quick thoughts on this story. I applaud a lot of the governors for keeping their National Guard in their own states to deal with whatever unrest is happening in their own states that they need to take care of, and not send them to Washington, D.C. to show this brute arm of force as if the little boy with his green men soldiers so he can play with them and display them in front of people as a sign of strength. That should not happen, and he should not have the power to use any military for that regard. So I applaud the governors for holding a stance to that. And then I will say, as far as the Pentagon denying the fact that they use rubber bullets and pepper spray to get the people out of Lafayette Park the other night, which is completely false because all the reporters say that the same thing had happened that was out there. He's even toted about using force against protesters. So you can't talk about how the governors are weak because they didn't use force against the protesters, and you use force against the protesters to clear the park so you can take a picture in front of a church and hold a Bible in your hand. It's just ridiculous. At this point, he is like a kid walking around playing with toy soldiers, and with no regard of human life. These are lives that you play around with and put in your hands, and you give a green light to the same oppression and the same abuse that we have suffered for years of that police brutality kind of mentality. So there's no need for this to continue. Please, November, please hurry up. A man who had been accused of traveling from central Illinois to Minneapolis to start a riot had at one time expressed enthusiasm for President Donald Trump. The St. Paul Pioneer Press reports that 28-year-old Matthew Lee Rupert, was accused this week of going to Minneapolis and handing out explosives that he encouraged others to throw at the police. The Pioneer Press review of Rupert's social media postings revealed that the alleged perpetrator expressed enthusiasm for President Donald Trump in several posts from 2017 and 2016, although some of his views appeared to be left-wing and he isn't a dedicated Trump supporter. Okay, so here's my thoughts on this story here. People say you don't like to paint people with a broad brush, right? But the thing to me about this and other stories about other people being involved in these marches and being agitators and causing all of the violence and so on and so forth, my issue in that is just this. If you had enthusiasm for Donald Trump, obviously for whatever reason, but the rhetoric he was spewing even in 2016 and 2017, even up until this very moment, has been the same of racial division. So you can be another and be upset that the police killed a person of color, that he killed him, but you're not upset about the system which leads up to the killing, which is the oppression part, the over-policing, the use of abusive force, and other incidences. So it is possible for someone who does not particularly care for the race of people to feel some type of way about that situation happening, yet at the same time egging on the people that it's happened to cause more destruction because they don't necessarily like, the direction in which the government is going and all of that. So, that's my thoughts on that. I could be wrong, but that's just my thoughts. And again, if you have any thoughts that are different, I implore you to leave your comments below. I'm interested. A peaceful protest of Black Lives Matter activists erupted into chaos when a white North Carolina man whipped out a weapon. 25-year-old Harold Walker pulled out a gun on two other white men during a peaceful protest, in Riotsville, North Carolina on Monday night, reports say. It remains unclear if the incident that took place at around 9:30 p.m. was related to the protest in which demonstrators asked for fair treatment of minorities by police. Either way, the police were quick to arrest Walker and charge him with carrying a concealed weapon. There were about 100 protesters gathered to speak out against the police brutality for several hours. Into the gathering was then Walker. He pulled out his gun and pointed it towards men standing near a parked car by the police department's main entrance. Protesters scattered and screamed and sought cover across the street. Now, here's my quick thoughts on this. Again, it is hard to decipher whether this person brandishing their gun was a supporter, a true supporter, or just a supporter to agitate because it's some way that they can kind of cloak themselves in the midst. So that's hard to tell, but I will say this. You can see that, of course, being that the person was white, they were apprehended and charged. They were not slammed to the ground and or killed as a sense of a police officer being in fear for their lives. So just pay attention to the difference. Where in which, if it was a person of color with that weapon, we'd be, add another name to the list. That's all I'm gonna say. But again, you can share your thoughts. I'll be interested to know what you think. Chechnya strongman leader Ramzan Kadyrov have made an unexpected plea into U.S. politics by suggesting that Donald Trump might have a thing or two to learn from him about human rights. In a social media post published early on Tuesday morning, Mr. Kadyrov demanded American authorities put an end to the mayhem and illegal actions against citizens. Police are lynching people right on the streets of American cities, he wrote. They are strangling citizens, beating them up and ramming them with cars. Kadyrov called for the international institutions and the United Nations to intervene to protect citizens against human rights violations, extrajudicial executions. The comments will have surprised some of people in Chechnya, the Islamic Republic on Russia's southern border, where he has long had a history of crushing dissentment and systematic human rights violations. The Chechen leader has also been credible, linking the abomination and torture and murder of many LGBT people living in Chechnya in a series of purges beginning in 2017. All right, here's my personal views on this. I think a lot of international leaders know how to get under this president's skin. If no other way to get under his skin and make him feel some type of ways to show how inadequate he is at something, or that the stuff he gloats about being the best or the best president or any of that nature, that he's not. And I think it's just a way to get under the man's skin. I really think that he really cares about the U.S. citizens and the level of brutality and treatment that we receive on this end, being that he has been known for years to torture and brutalize their own citizens in Chechnya. So I'm like, okay. Again, I just think it's something to get under the president's skin, and he doesn't like when people, especially other leaders, especially those who use military force and are very dictators, kind of undermine him by not praising him in a sense. So it's probably just to get under his skin. So we'll see. But anyway, that's my thoughts on that. On to the next. Apple CEO Tim Cook sent a memo to employees on Sunday addressing the killing of George Floyd. Protests have erupted in cities across the country after the killing of George Floyd, who's an unarmed black man, at the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department. Widespread anger over Floyd's killing sparked protests, clashing with police looting in several cities. In the memo, Cook condemned the killing and called for a creation of a better, more just world for everyone. We can have no society worth celebrating unless we can guarantee freedom from fear for every person who gives this country their love, labor, and life, Cook said. Cook also acknowledged that racial injustice exists in the U.S., including in our criminal justice system and in the dispiriting toll of disease on black and brown communities, as well as from economic inequalities and disparities in educational opportunities. The memo comes as Apple closes some of its U.S. stores as the protests turned violent over the weekend. Okay, so here's my thoughts on this. It's admirable that the CEO of Apple gave out a letter to his employees condemning the acts of the police officer and the police brutality and all of those things. However, part of me, knowing that it's a business and knowing that if you didn't probably stand on the one side than the other, that, you know, sales would probably drop, people would probably not want to buy your product and all that other stuff, kind of makes me give a side eye to all that. It's great, but it's like, well, what else are you doing? Do more than just send out a memo. Actually, do something. Push for something is what I'm looking for when the CEOs of companies that they know, the African American community, other communities of color, go out and buy their products. Do more than send out a memo. Actually do something to where in which I see that even though I buy your product, you do care about what's actually happening to me and my people. Louisville Mayor Greg Fletcher on Monday announced the firing of the city's police chief after learning that 2 officers involved in the fatal shooting of a black business owner had not activated their body cams. Fletcher said both officers had been put on administrative leave. This type of institutional failure will not be tolerated. Accordingly, I have relieved Steve Conyard of his duties as police chief of the Louisville Metro Police Department. Of the victim, identified as David McCaddy, who owned a barbecue near the shooting scene, CBS affiliate reported. The mayor called McCaddy a wonderful citizen and said that many knew him as the barbecue man. Police said the shooting happened when officers tried to break up a large group of protesters. They said someone opened fire on law enforcement and officers returned fire. The 2 officers involved in the shooting violated the department policy by not wearing or activating the body cams. As Deputy Chief said, we will review the entire incident to determine if there were any other policies violated that occurred. I assure you that there will be discipline for failing to utilize our cameras. The Kentucky State Police will also be conducting an independent oversight investigation, the mayor said. The National Guard will also carry out an investigation. In addition, the U.S. Attorney Russell Coleman announced on Monday night that the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office will also investigate the shooting and will take any appropriate action that is warranted by the facts and the law. Okay, here's my thoughts on this story. It is unfortunate that once again an unarmed black man has lost his life. The only good thing that comes out of this story, if there was ever such a thing, was that the officers were reprimanded. I mean, I don't understand. If you're a law enforcement officer, you are in charge to enforce the laws. So if you violate the laws as someone in charge of the laws, then you need to be charged and at a higher caliber than a normal citizen, because you are the one to enforce it. So if you violate that, then you should be. It's ironic that, of course, your body cam wasn't working, because, of course, if you fired the first shot that happened to kill the man, your body cam would not be working, because it would show that you was firing at people that was throwing things at you, or you lost your temper. I mean, I just don't get it. I just don't get it how people think it's just so free that they have that much authority to be judge, jury, and executioner on people and then get to walk away scot-free. Again, but that has a lot to do with the nature of it. If everybody has gone through that cycle and been exonerated from it, then of course at this point they'd be looking like, what do you mean I'm in trouble? I've been doing this all this time. You know how many people I done killed, quote unquote, and gotten away with it? So, I mean, yeah, better late than never, but still, it's still a huge problem. Civil rights leaders say that they have been disappointed and stunned by Mark Zuckerberg's apparent inability to understand race issues following an hour-long meeting late Monday with the Facebook founder. Colors of Change President Rashida Robinson told the Bloomberg News, that Zuckerberg failed to show any comprehension during their Monday meeting call. Robertson also said, "The problem with my ongoing conversation with Mark is that I felt like I spent a lot of time explaining to him why these things are a problem, and I think he just very much lacked the ability to understand it." The leaders took particular issue with Facebook's decision to leave up Trump's incendiary comments on George Floyd's protesters, in which he said, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." In a joint statement, the heads of the Leadership Conference on Civil Human Rights, the NAACP, the Legal Defense League, and Education Fund, and the Color of Change said that we're disappointed and stunned that Mark's incomprehensible explanation for allowing the Trump post to remain up. Now, some of this is going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, but I'm sorry, excuse me, but wake the fuck up. Okay, this is the same Mark Zuckerberg, same Facebook CEO who's been dabbling, taking money from the Russians that they've been giving him and putting Trump ads in Facebook and doing all that kind of manipulating people, having these false things come up like, Biden don't like black people or Hillary don't like black people in regards to the 2016 election. So while we're not surprised that he's acting dumbfounded to the plight of black and brown people, get with it, people. He don't see it. You know what I'm saying? And when you don't see it, you see it. That sort of thing. Get with it. Because when you don't see it, you see it. And he's very much a part of the crew. He's a Trump boy. He tries to act like he's not, but he is. Because again, when you have big businesses, especially those that don't really care about the people, they just care about the profit, like a Trump situation. All they're looking at is numbers and money, and Trump can bring the money. Now, it doesn't last long. He might wind up having you go bankrupt, but for the time being, he brings in the money. And them Russian oligarchs actually are pouring money into Facebook, pouring money into whatever hole they can to make sure that they can get a seat at the table at the summits and things if Donald Trump pushes it enough. So yeah, they all in bed together, and I'm not surprised that he's looking like, well, I don't see the problem in it. Yeah, of course you wouldn't see the problem in it. That's why I don't really mess with Facebook like that, because of this very thing. It's divisive. It is very divisive. I mean, he tries to play nice, but he's on a whole nother thing. If Trump had his own media source, Facebook would be it. That's all I'm saying. A top advisor and lawyer for President Donald Trump's re-election campaign has a history of pushing anti-gay positions, including linking the legalization of same-sex marriage to bestiality and pedophilia. Jana Ellis, the attorney who previously served as a director for the public policy at socially conservative James Dobson's Family Institute, has repeatedly attacked the Supreme Court's 2003 decision in Lawrence versus Texas, which overturned the state's law that criminalized homosexuality activities between consenting adults. She has since become a prominent surrogate for the president on TV and radio, defending him during the impeachment trial and praising his handling over the coronavirus pandemic. She drew attention this week when she defended the president from criticism on Monday after a tense exchange with two female journalists, which led to Trump walking out of the press conference. Okay, so here's my quick thoughts on the matter. I really hope that none of these people who are so gun-ho, pro-Trumpers, I hope they never see the light of political day. where they are in any other cabinet, any other office. I hope they get so kicked out of anything in Washington, D.C. that they can only find a job at their local supermarket. Like, I am just so sick and tired of these yes men and women that, you know, I mean, you would swear this man was like Jesus or something. I mean, the way they just like every word he says, it's ridiculous. As if, you know, they will lose their life if they said something against him. It's almost crazy. It's almost satanic, cult-like. It is crazy. I'm telling you, you gotta wake up, people. It is something in the water, and it ain't Kool-Aid. I'm just saying, it is something crazy. Cause that's just outright crazy. I don't even have no words to express the craziness. And not to mention, to get on that whole bestiality and pedophilia. Okay, yeah. And who are the leaders in that? Okay, I'll wait for that one. Who's the leaders in the bestiality and the pedophilia? It sure ain't this, it ain't these mostly melanated people. I tell you that. And then on top of that, yeah, you might want to wrangle up a lot of these married people, a lot of these priests, and all of that nature. It don't have nothing to do with two people who are in love deciding to marry one another and be committed to one another. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with those other things that you don't check. And here's some news we can celebrate. Some of the most famous geniuses of our time have all had one thing in common. They all had higher IQ levels than the average person. Now, one British teenager and child prodigy is performing at levels higher than the geniuses like Bill Gates and Albert Einstein. Meet Romani Wilford. Wilford shows signs of genius potential from an early age. In preschool, he was already able to read and write before other kids in his age group, and by the age of 10, he had written a paper on justice theory that earned high academic acclaim and got the attention of the organization called Mensa, a high IQ society that caters to individuals with IQs ranking in the top 2% of the global population. In a report by the BBC, Wilfred scored higher than physicist Stephen Hawking and scientist Albert Einstein at just the age of 11 with a score of 162. This notable feat earned him the label genius and is considered the smartest boy in London. Once again, thank you for watching CCN Midday News. Hope you enjoyed. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also hit that notification button so you will never miss another news update. Have a great day. Peace.